OMG. Your soulmate cut someone off after finding out this about you. Something shifted the instant your soulmate heard a single unexpected sentence, and nobody in that room realized it would quietly change the direction of several lives. A conversation that began with casual laughter suddenly turned into silence. One person looked away. Another tried to change the subject. But your soulmate didn't smile anymore. Their eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with the unmistakable expression of someone connecting pieces that had never made sense before. The air felt different. The room seemed smaller. And although no one said your name again for several long seconds, you were suddenly at the center of everything. Stay with this, because the smallest detail in that conversation became the reason someone disappeared from your soulmate's life before the day was over. It wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices. No emotional speeches. That was what made it so unforgettable. The person sitting across from your soulmate believed they were sharing harmless information. They casually mentioned something they had recently discovered about you, something surprisingly kind, deeply genuine, and completely opposite of the image they had been trying to create for months. They admitted, almost by accident, that you had quietly helped someone without asking for recognition. They revealed that you had protected another person's feelings instead of defending yourself. They even confessed that every story they had heard about you before no longer matched reality. As those words settled into the silence, your soulmate's expression changed. Every strange feeling they had ignored, every confusing rumor, every moment they had questioned their own instincts suddenly formed one clear picture. There's another piece you haven't seen yet, because the realization wasn't only about you, it was about someone standing right beside them. The next few minutes unfolded like a scene from a movie where nobody understood the ending except one person. Your soulmate began remembering dozens of tiny moments they had dismissed before, conversations that felt oddly rehearsed, messages that arrived at suspicious times, compliments that secretly pushed them away from trusting you. Little comments disguised as concern that always left them doubting your character. Suddenly those memories looked completely different. The person beside them wasn't protecting them at all, they had been quietly steering the story from the shadows. And once your soulmate recognized that pattern, something inside them became incredibly calm. They didn't argue. They didn't accuse anyone. Instead, they simply stood up, offered a polite goodbye, and walked away with a quiet confidence that surprised everyone watching. Before the evening ended, they stopped answering that person's calls, ignored their messages, and closed the door on a connection that no longer deserved a place in their life. But what happened after that decision revealed an even deeper truth, one your soulmate never expected to discover, and that's where this story takes its most unforgettable turn. The following morning carried a strange kind of peace, the kind that only appears after a difficult decision has already been made. Your soulmate didn't feel the need to explain themselves to anyone. Instead, they quietly observed everything that unfolded around them. And almost immediately, something remarkable happened. The person they had cut off began trying to reconnect in subtle ways. A friendly message appeared. Then another. A casual joke. An invitation that felt unusually forced. It was as if they suddenly realized they had lost the influence they once believed would always be there. But your soulmate noticed something different this time. Every word felt carefully calculated instead of sincere. Every apology seemed more concerned with restoring control than repairing trust. That realization only strengthened their decision. Around that same time, another unexpected discovery surfaced about you. Someone completely unrelated shared a story about your quiet integrity, describing how you had chosen honesty over personal gain when nobody was watching. Your soulmate listened without interrupting, almost smiling to themselves. It confirmed what their heart had been trying to say all along, that the version of you created through gossip had never been the real you. If this story is beginning to remind you of how easily misunderstandings can shape people's lives, feel free to share your thoughts below. Someone else reading them may need that reminder today. And if you're enjoying how this story is unfolding, subscribing helps you catch the next chapter when it arrives, because what happens next changes the emotional direction of everything. By that evening, your soulmate found themselves revisiting places that unexpectedly reminded them of you. A quiet cafe where conversations lingered longer than coffee. A park bench where the wind carried familiar memories. A street corner glowing beneath golden sunset light. Nothing extraordinary happened on the outside, yet everything felt different within. Instead of replaying old doubts, they began replaying moments they had overlooked, small acts of kindness, patient conversations, thoughtful gestures, and those subtle expressions in your eyes that now carried completely new meaning. They realized they had spent too much time listening to people who spoke loudly and not enough time trusting what they had personally experienced. That understanding brought an unfamiliar feeling, relief. Not because every question had been answered, but because the confusion was finally disappearing. The more distance they placed between themselves and the person they had cut off, the clearer your presence became in their mind. It wasn't built on fantasy or impulse. It was built on evidence collected through quiet moments they finally understood. There is still one important detail hidden beneath all of this, and once it comes into view, you'll understand why your soulmate refuses to look back. Late that night, while the world around them settled into silence, your soulmate came across something they hadn't expected to find. It wasn't a dramatic confession or a shocking secret. It was something much simpler, and because of that, far more powerful. They discovered a conversation that had taken place long before, where someone had defended your character even when you weren't there to hear it. There had been no audience to impress, no reward to gain, and no reason to pretend. Those genuine words stood in complete contrast to everything the other person had tried to convince them to believe. In that quiet moment, your soulmate finally understood that truth rarely announces itself with noise. It reveals itself through consistency. Through actions that remain the same whether anyone is watching or not. Sitting alone beneath the soft glow of a nearby lamp, they let out a slow breath and realized the chapter they had closed wasn't a loss at all, it was the beginning of seeing you with completely new eyes. Yet before they could decide what to do with this realization, someone unexpected stepped into the picture carrying information that neither of you could have predicted. And that single conversation would make your soulmate question whether fate had been arranging these moments all along. A quiet afternoon unfolded with an almost cinematic stillness, yet beneath that calm, something extraordinary was already in motion. Your soulmate wasn't searching for answers anymore. They had decided to let life reveal whatever came next naturally. But sometimes, the moments we don't chase become the ones that change everything. While running an ordinary errand, they unexpectedly crossed paths with someone who knew you in a way they never imagined. It wasn't a close friend or a family member. It was simply someone whose opinion carried no agenda, no hidden motive, and no reason to exaggerate. As the conversation drifted toward your name, your soulmate listened without interrupting. What they heard didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded honest. They learned about the way you encouraged people without asking for recognition, the way you stayed loyal even when nobody noticed, and the quiet strength you carried through difficult seasons without making them everyone else's burden. Every sentence painted another piece of a picture your soulmate had never been allowed to see before. In that moment, they realized something almost impossible to ignore. Every genuine story about you seemed remarkably consistent, while every negative story had come from the very same person they had already chosen to leave behind. That contrast settled deeply in their heart, and they quietly wondered how many beautiful moments they had nearly missed because they trusted the wrong voice. As the day continued, your soulmate found themselves noticing little signs they had overlooked for months. A song that suddenly reminded them of one of your conversations. A familiar scent that brought back a forgotten memory. A photograph that once seemed ordinary now carried an entirely different meaning. They weren't imagining things, they were finally seeing them without confusion clouding their judgment. They remembered the times you never tried to compete for attention, the moments you chose understanding over winning an argument, and the quiet patience you showed even when circumstances were unfair. Those memories no longer felt isolated. They connected like stars forming a constellation that had been hidden behind passing clouds. Your soulmate smiled for the first time in what felt like forever, not because every problem had disappeared, but because certainty was replacing uncertainty. They understood that trust isn't built by loud promises. It's built by countless small moments that remain true over time. And suddenly, the distance between you no longer felt like an ending. Instead, it felt like a bridge waiting for someone brave enough to cross it. But just as hope began to settle into their heart, an unexpected message appeared on their phone, one they almost ignored until they noticed who had sent it. The message contained only a few simple words, yet it carried more weight than an entire conversation. It came from someone who had quietly witnessed everything from the sidelines without taking anyone's side. There were no dramatic accusations or emotional speeches. Instead, the message revealed that several people had recently admitted they had misunderstood you because they had trusted information that was never fully true. Some even expressed regret for judging you before knowing your heart. Reading those words left your soulmate completely still. For a long moment, they didn't type a reply. They simply looked out the window as the evening light slowly faded across the sky, realizing that truth has a remarkable way of finding its own path, even when no one tries to defend it. The decision to cut that one person out of their life suddenly felt even more meaningful, because it had opened the door for reality to finally speak for itself. Yet just when your soulmate believed they understood the entire story, one final discovery quietly surfaced. A discovery connected directly to something you had done long ago without expecting anyone would ever find out. And once that hidden act came into the light, your soulmate knew there was no turning back from what they were about to feel. An ordinary evening slowly transformed into something unforgettable when your soulmate uncovered the one piece of the story that had been quietly waiting in the background all along. It wasn't hidden inside a dramatic confession or an emotional confrontation. Instead, it appeared through a forgotten moment that someone happened to mention while looking through old memories. They spoke about a time when you had every opportunity to make yourself look better by putting someone else down, but you chose kindness instead. You protected another person's dignity even though it meant receiving no credit at all. As your soulmate listened, an overwhelming sense of admiration replaced every remaining doubt. They realized your character had never depended on who was watching. It remained the same in public and in private. That discovery carried more weight than any rumor ever could. It answered questions they hadn't even known they were asking. And in that quiet realization, they finally understood why removing that negative influence from their life had brought such unexpected clarity. If this story has kept you wondering what truth can quietly accomplish over time, consider sharing it with someone who enjoys uplifting stories like this. And if you're curious to see where this journey leads next, subscribing is a simple way to make sure you don't miss the next chapter, because the most meaningful conversation is still waiting just ahead. As the days passed, your soulmate stopped looking backward completely. Something inside them had changed. Their attention was no longer fixed on explaining the past but on understanding the future. They began noticing opportunities to reconnect with the feelings they had once pushed aside. Every memory involving you now carried warmth instead of uncertainty. They remembered your calm smile during difficult moments, your ability to listen without interrupting, and the quiet confidence that never demanded attention. Those memories didn't arrive all at once. They surfaced naturally, one after another, each one strengthening a picture that now felt impossible to ignore. Even the people around your soulmate noticed the difference. They seemed lighter, more peaceful, more certain of their own instincts. For the first time in a long while, they trusted what their heart had experienced instead of what someone else's opinions had suggested. Yet just when everything seemed to be settling into place, an unexpected coincidence occurred. Someone mentioned your name in a completely unrelated conversation, and what they revealed made your soulmate stop walking in the middle of the street, completely surprised by how perfectly everything suddenly connected. That unexpected conversation revealed that while your soulmate had been quietly discovering the truth, you had never been trying to prove yourself at all. You had simply continued living with the same honesty that had always defined you, never realizing how many people were beginning to notice it on their own. That realization touched your soulmate more deeply than they expected. They understood that genuine people rarely spend their energy convincing others who they are. Time does that for them. Standing beneath the fading colors of the evening sky, they felt something they hadn't felt in a very long time. A quiet excitement about what could happen next. They weren't thinking about the person they had left behind anymore. That chapter had already closed. Their thoughts were entirely focused on one question they could no longer ignore. If everything they had believed about you had changed, what would happen if they finally spoke to you with complete honesty? The answer was closer than they imagined, because before another sunrise arrived, circumstances were about to place the two of you closer than either of you ever expected, and neither heart would leave that moment unchanged. The next sunrise carried a quiet anticipation that neither of you could have predicted. Your soulmate woke up with one thought refusing to leave their mind: some opportunities only arrive once, and they are far too valuable to let fear decide their outcome. Instead of rushing into action, they chose patience. They replayed every lesson the past few days had taught them. They remembered how easily outside voices had blurred their judgment and how quickly the truth had restored their peace. Then something unexpected happened. While going about an ordinary day, they found themselves only a few steps away from you without either of you planning it. It wasn't a grand event or a dramatic coincidence. It was one of those quiet moments life creates when the timing finally feels right. For a brief second, everything around them seemed to slow down. The conversations in the background faded. The noise of the street became distant. What remained was the realization that the person they had spent so much time trying to understand was finally standing within reach. Before a single word was spoken, they noticed something they had overlooked countless times before. Your calm confidence had never been an act. It came from someone who had nothing to prove. And in that instant, your soulmate knew they had made the right decision by walking away from the person who had tried to rewrite your story. Neither of you rushed to fill the silence. Surprisingly, it was the silence itself that carried the most meaning. Your soulmate smiled first, not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because the uncertainty had finally disappeared. There was no pressure, no performance, and no need to revisit old misunderstandings. Instead, the conversation unfolded naturally, almost as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. You spoke about simple things, dreams that still mattered, goals that continued to inspire you, and the little moments that made life meaningful. As each sentence passed, your soulmate quietly compared the person standing before them with the image that someone else had once tried so hard to create. The difference was impossible to ignore. Reality was warmer, kinder, more genuine. They realized that trust isn't built through dramatic promises but through consistency that quietly reveals itself over time. Every answer you gave, every thoughtful pause, and every sincere smile reinforced what they already felt deep inside. The connection no longer depended on assumptions. It was finally being shaped by first-hand experience, and that made all the difference. As the evening sky turned shades of gold and deep blue, your soulmate walked away carrying something far greater than relief. They carried certainty. They understood that cutting one person out of their life had never been about losing someone, it had been about making room for truth to finally breathe. Looking back, they felt grateful for every unexpected twist that had led them here, because without those moments, they might never have discovered who you truly were. And perhaps the most beautiful realization of all was this: while they had been searching for answers about you, you had simply continued being yourself all along. No speeches. No attempts to convince anyone. Just quiet authenticity that eventually spoke louder than every rumor combined. As they looked toward the horizon one last time before heading home, a peaceful thought settled into their heart. Some connections don't grow stronger because everything goes perfectly. They grow stronger because the truth survives every misunderstanding. And with that realization, your soulmate made one final promise to themselves, that from this day forward, they would never again allow someone else's voice to become louder than the evidence of their own heart, because the future waiting ahead was finally built on trust instead of doubt.